Good afternoon. I'm Paul McKean, Director of Further Education, Skills and Training at Jisc, and I'm delighted to chair this next session. Before I introduce our speaker, Chris Sumner, a reminder to submit any questions via the conference app, or you can ask a question in the traditional way by raising your hand at the end of the session, but please remember to wait for the roaming mic so the recording captures your question and Chris and I can also hear that and respond effectively. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first FE speaker of the day and our first speaker from one of the devolved nations, Chris Sumner, who's the Head of Management Information Systems at South Lanarkshire College, and his session is around empowering change, the impact of data on our college's workflow. Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good afternoon. I guess I better start with a picture of me with hair. This is me. I'm head of MIS. I've been working for South Lanarkshire College now for actually around about 12 years, but I've only been the head of MIS for about 3. Previous to that, I was an SLC IT tech. So I'm going to try my very best today not to be technical or get into the nuts and bolts of things. Me moving into head of MIS was very much about getting strategic and looking at data and things like that. So as the head of MIS, I look after IT development, student records, and of course with that comes data analysis. So yeah, but previous to that, I was actually a digital forensic investigator. I was a forensic scientist. Again, working with data has been part of my career for such a long time, right back to 2008 there. So yeah, this is me. Take what you will with the fact that I have less hair now than I did in that picture, but yes, that might be something to do with the data I've been working with over these years. South Lanarkshire College, just to say, we are a college just outside Glasgow, about 20 minutes from the centre, about 5,500 students, so it's a relatively small to medium-sized college, 350 staff, and we provide about 150 courses, so that gives you a picture of us. But what we're very proud of is that 97% of our students progress to positive destinations. And we have strong links with our local community and businesses. If you kind of put a picture of Glasgow up, we're on the kind of the rural side, so we're on the way out of Glasgow as you drive towards England, actually. So it's we also have some great articulation routes with the UWS, Strathclyde Uni, and some of the other universities. So we're an FE college with some HE links in there as well. Now, to talk about what we're going to do, go through today, and I'm trying my best not to make it into a lecture or talk technical and things like that. It's just to give you an oversight into what we've done in South Lanarkshire College over the last three-ish years, a bit more than that. So it's, the importance of data and decision making. The original slide had that as the title for it, so you can take what you will. It's interesting to listen to the conversations that are happening this morning about the importance of data and all this sort of thing around our decisions. And actually, we've lived through it as a journey, so I'm very much interested in, I'm hoping to kind of show you this off today, how we collect our data, the insights we use, some of the changes and impact on staff and students from implementing those changes and the way we operate and the workflows we changed, and then just to touch on some challenges and futures that we've got in the plan. So I began with a stat. Anyone remember what the stat was? I know it was very quite quick. 97% of students getting successful. In fact, it's right on the screen there, 98% of students, so you round it up if you will. I think that's one of the things that happened this morning is it was 5%, no, it's 1.3%. So we all know that really data matters. It's right in front of us. This is really important to us. And, our starting point in education is that we ensure what we do matters, and being able to track that is really important. So we always start with that. But I kind of categorize 2 things with this. So we have to work backwards from compliance. That whole thing about what do we need as data is really important. And we all, whether you're English, Scottish, any kind of education, HEFE, we all have to work backwards from compliance. And it was on that initial slide this morning about it, the government returns. In Scotland, we have to submit our information to the Scottish Funding Council. Down here, it's the HESA and things like that. So it's really important to work backwards from compliance. and then working backwards from necessity. What do we actually need? And that was the big questions when I first joined the college as the head of information, when I became head of information systems there, was asking these questions and finding the basis for it. So, yes, of course, we talk about education and learning, but we also have to consider the operations. And we have done that in SLC. We've looked at not just how the data is working in our students and our student-led courses and all the rest of it. We also talk about how our operations are working. Are the computers on, switching on in time and things like this? So I obviously come from an IT background, so I'm really interested in whether the things are performing right, whether the cybersecurity is there. But I think it's important to cover both when we say that we're talking about our data and what we do with it. And naturally, from that data, the more data you have, the better decisions we can create from that and have informed decisions about it. And that's really happened at SLC. That's actually changed the way we've operated in our senior leadership team and our board and all the rest of it. So you had a diagram this morning. It was an interesting one. It was a Venn diagram with kind of your foundation and your offensive and defensive stuff. And this is no different. I kind of threw this together thinking, I need to talk about our data collection methods, or what we do. And across the top, you've got planning data, how you create your courses. You've got your student records data. SMID is in Scotland is to do with the impoverished areas. So that's where we've got our postcodes of most deprived students coming from, fees and result data. So all this data is sitting at the top. And this lends itself well because you want that to feed into one data source. You want that single source of truth. Whether you're in different parts of that Venn diagram from this morning, you want to kind of hone in on knowing that you're going to get the same data, whatever report comes out of it. And that's exactly what we did. We have literally one data source. We have literally one data set built around all these different areas. So how do we collect the data? Well, yeah, there's an application form. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The application forms already exist. The enrollment forms already exist. So all we're doing is making sure those are validated right. They're being brought into the system correctly. You have student surveys. You have things like attendance and timetable systems. We didn't change anything at all. When I first came in, we didn't change anything to do with enrollments. We made sure that enrollment form was the same purpose as it was required for Scottish Funding Council. It was the same with the application form. And we made sure that the data going in was correct. Now, there was a question earlier on, was, how do you get the students to engage with that? Well, basically, there's a bit of a hard stop here, is if you can't apply for a course, you're not coming on the course. And there are mandatory fields that we all put into our application form because they need to do it. And sometimes that just pushes people away. So you do have varying degrees of forms and things, varying degrees of forms. For example, my commercial courses, I wouldn't do a full-blown enrollment form for because we don't invest data for our commercial courses as opposed to a student that's coming through some of our mainstream courses. So just to kind of throw these ones up on here, these are a couple of tools that we use. You might recognize the Unit E, that's our student record information. The planning tool, which I'll touch on, was really key in our journey as well. We've got timetable, and there was a question this morning about staffing, and yes, we do tracking of staffing, and we do look at the data for staffing. And we have a mixture, just to tell you for the background, we have a mixture of in-house and outsourced programs, mainly in-house initially, but we are working away on CEDA and Unit E and the curriculum plan. That's what CP stands for, so curriculum plan. And actually, I'm just going to show you a picture of curriculum plan because that's our starting basis. This was when if you think about the cycle we have to do our planning, to put the courses on the website, to then get those people applying, and so on. So the learner journey starts at the planning stage. So just to bring this up, this is our curriculum plan system, totally in-house built. And someone asked me once, does curriculum plan only do your course stuff? And I went, no, ours doesn't do just course creation. It does, and I'll have to read this off the notes. We've got information sent to the website, so all prospectus information, sending data to student records information. It calculates the staff required per course, shows if it's efficient or not. That's a bit of a bad example because I've got black on there where you'd have a red light, green light kind of view on there. It builds the units and it sends data to the student support, the bursary team for student funding. That was where we started from, and it's incredible. Some of those things, and this might happen, I might look around the room and people go, I've got a spreadsheet that does my student support funds, I've got my courses on a spreadsheet. we took all those spreadsheets and put them into a system so that we could design it. And that led it, which meant that at data entry, we could validate it. So this was incredible, and this was a labor of love for about 2 years for me setting this up. But it meant that the validation going in was correct, and we pivot off this now for our information. So I can't spend too long on curriculum plan. I remember some people might want to go, oh, well, tell us a bit more about it. That's fine, but that could take an entire hour to talk through this, and I've only got 30 minutes to actually talk to you about things. We do that, and we have those systems, and then we look at our data insights. So this is some of our Power BI reporting. This is our retention, and yes, we use Power BI. I think most people in this room use Power BI. What's key, though, is having those accurate data sources. I've mentioned that as we've gone through this. You know, we've had that kind of top level of information coming through. We have accurate filtering of that data. So Power BI has that button at the top that says refresh all the filters. It was training staff to make sure that came in, and then they pressed that button, and it always came back to the same number, the right number to start with, and then you could filter down. This kind of page here of one of these stats, you know, these are already broken up into a filtering that's useful for us. So that's quite key. And really, the importance of insights was incredible. It's no good just giving people a spreadsheet anymore. We have to have graphs and stuff. That means that at a glance, it was very easy to use. So I've skipped over because that report actually comes from a big spreadsheet. And I'm just going to kind of pause and have a small story for you. So we have visits from Education Scotland. It's the inspectorate for the colleges in Scotland. It'd be Ofsted and things like that for England. And they've seen this in 2022. We'd set it up. And what you're seeing here is a breakdown of our early withdrawals, further withdrawals, our retention, and then achievement beyond that. So in one dashboard, I can see all of our groups of curriculum areas are full-time or part-time, further education, higher education, and an overview at the top. I really hope the slides are shared afterwards, because I know it's a bit small to see it on the screen. But you basically work top to bottom, left to right. Okay, so that's our totals to start with. Across the top, we have our filters, and down the right-hand side, we have our cuts, various cuts of data. So we've got our ages, we've got our key groups, our genders and things like that. So we can go into there, and that data will filter down through each one of those pages. And the story I'm talking about with Education Scotland was they came and seen this, and they said, well, how do you know how many students you've got, and how did you know that? Like, well, we have this. This is coming real time from our student record information. This is updated every hour, every day, from whatever's been published into that student record information, student record system. So at the moment, we're using SITs, we use Tribal, and basically as they enrolled, they become a stat, a figure on here. If they withdrew before the required date, before the census date, it became an early withdrawal. If it was beyond it, it was further. So in real time, we were able to see this information. They didn't get it. They couldn't see how, as we've actually had this morning, looking through the windscreen was the right way to look at it. We've had that comment about looking through the windscreen rather than looking in the rear view. Now, what we confirmed later on was once we'd done this and then we had the results in, which means we had the part achieved and into employment, and we then matched that to make sure that was absolutely bang on with what we were returning to the government, we could then strongly advise our staff, our lecturers, about using this. So first year was a bit kind of, are we sure these numbers are right? Does it sound okay? Following year, Education Scotland, the inspectorate came in, said, didn't get it. A year later, they got it. They'd totally seen that. We were, I think it was actually out by 0.01% overall in the whole data. And that was getting really grounded to the data and making sure it was correct, it was matching what was going to Scottish Funding Council, and it was getting everybody on board with the way that data was entered. So it's an overview, and some would argue actually that's still a spreadsheet. So what we did was cut it a different way. So we're then able to give ourselves an idea about comparing years, which is then used with board and senior leadership meetings, where I could see my early withdrawals, my further withdrawals. So the color coding really helps, as you can see. So your early withdrawals, and there's your numbers, there's the stats, and then there's our achieved. So it meant that we didn't have to go and drag that spreadsheet out and start doing our own pivot tables, start making the data work for us. And that has been key. And just lastly, as another example, we also have our funding streams. And again, it's a bit of a mix, this one. It's got graphs and it's got data. And what we have is, I had to blank out because it was names of people in here, so just for data protection, that's why you see a bit of a blur at the front there. But basically, it was our curriculum plan, our curriculum managers, their areas, and who's reaching target or not. And in Scotland, we work with credits rather than pounds and pence, as you would do in England. Credits are 40 hours of teaching, so that's where we have an activity schedule for it. So it allows us to look at it. There was some question earlier on about, whether we see again, trying to just demonstrate we're looking at the front window, not the rear view. If we look across the top line, there's some big numbers there. You've got 40,300, then 567, and so on across the way. And there's pluses and minuses and calculations across it. The 567 is our potential withdrawals. That's where students haven't been attending or something's not quite been the criteria for them and has been a worry. So we're doing a little bit of that kind of data intelligence to let us know that there's a risk to that activity and a risk to those students not achieving or not being able to be funded because they might have been an attendance before the required date, attendance before the census date. And actually it goes as far as to say, well, there's potentially been no submissions for that student either. So what we have is we have a number at a very high level, but behind it there's kind of some logic behind it. And that gives us a worst case and best case scenario. So I know don't want to teach you about the number crunching across the way there, but your best case scenario is that we're 364 credits away. Your worst case is 931. Now, I'll tell you that's data from about 6 weeks ago. In fact, I say 6 weeks, it's 8th of the 1st, actually. You can see it at the top right corner. I lied a bit there. It was, but that's actually in a lot better position because we've had our January intake and things have moved forward. So we actually are meeting our target. So if you take a picture of that, that's old data, just so you know. So you can see that these Power BI reports, the way we've modified it, that we've kind of honed in on various things, has been incredibly useful for us. And we make real-time decisions from it. I think, showing you the data collection, the model we use in terms of our strategy, what we ended up pumping out in terms of the Power BI, then demonstrates how we implemented the change. We basically then had those reports to sit in senior leadership teams and look at. It's up to the hour, it's up to the day information. So that becomes the way we changed our workflow. If we have an agenda item that says, what's our activity for this week in a bi-quarterly senior leadership team, everyone opened a Power BI report and I could see it there and then, and everyone had the same information. So yeah, it's been incredibly useful for our real-time decision-making. Are those courses not running? Are they low recruitment? We can see that from our dashboard. What I didn't show you in the credit projection one is there's a way of breaking down the performance, so you can then drill into it basically, and I kind of failed to mention that. We all want the crystal ball. I think that's the holy grail to data is we want that future prediction. And naturally, you will all have spreadsheets, Power BI reports, and things where you're looking into the future with it. And that's exactly what we're doing, is we're using that to then plan, right, do we need to put more courses on? But we're doing it, as we say, through that front window. We're seeing and having that review. So our courses start usually towards the end of August. We know roughly what our intake is by second or third week of September. If we haven't had it, we start hedging our bets and start looking at whether we need to add additional courses on for the January or later into November. So we're making that decision then. We're not waiting till the Feds return, the Scottish funding return. We're not waiting till data's after the fact. We're doing it as it goes. There is performance questions from that as well. We obviously look at whether the lecturers have got the number of hours associated with their timetable and things like that. But also building performance, if we're finding that the first couple of weeks has got an absolute influx of students walking in the door, are all the computers up to date? Are they running okay? So I do touch on operational because that's my background. I've got to say something about it, haven't I? So yeah, and then what happens as well is, we have to then measure success. So we'd make that change. We can then use the reports to do it. But what I will say, and this is the point where I Jisc plug, is that we also use the digital elevation tool, the business building digital capabilities, and those tools are also data that we use to find out our change and success and how well we're doing with our changes and things. It's worth noting as well that we obviously work with things like CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers in Scotland, and they have things like the Cyber Risk Framework and ICO accountability, so data protection. So there are other things here that we have, and essentially what we've been building, I haven't got it to show today, is a compliance dashboard that allows us to see what goes on across the college. And everything you see here can be snapshotted, and then we can see the distance travelled. And 6 months down the line, we can say, yeah, that moved well, or no, that didn't. And that's all about us measuring change and success. So a couple more slides, don't worry, I'm nearly done. Challenges. So, yeah, I think everybody here is going on a data journey, and everybody here has looked at, how well they are doing in terms of implementing reports and things like that. My first challenge is getting the data right, and I'm actually going to bring up user acceptance and training, because these two factors were incredibly tough in our first year. You had people that had old reports, spreadsheets, that just did not want to move to Power BI. They just, and I can see nods in the audience, yeah, we all know that. They just don't want to. Their data is right, and I'm not going to be told anything else. That was really hard to break. And we're talking about, and this is the bit where burden comes into it. If I go to this report, it's going to make it harder for me to do my job. No, it isn't. See the potential of it, spend the time with it. And actually, we did get to a point where I had an argument about the fact that the data they were actually looking at was wrong. It was from the wrong source. It was from the wrong data. It was not matching the other person or the other line manager's data. So bringing the data through in that kind of standard, that kind of in the strategy where you saw the master data set, it was so key for that to kind of hold fast with. I kind of had to go, no, I definitely know this data is right. And then, of course, you get the training aspect as well. Well, it's a new report. I've never seen it before. I don't know how to filter. As you can see, the report was pretty simplistic. It's just a set of filters across the top. And people fear that because it's not an Excel filter, or it's not, I've used Crystal Reports and SAP before, and, those filters are just as hard as they're as bad as you want to make it, kind of thing. There's a lot of programs out there that can make it worse for you. I found Power BI incredibly useful, but it was just getting them to trust it and having that routine of, if you don't know where you are, you've got lost in the filter, hit the reset button, get yourself back to square one and start again. So a couple of these next points will just resonate with everybody in here. There's a point where you show too much information, and yeah, we had that. We had too many spreadsheets sitting out there, and it was impossible to get through, which is why the Power BI reports have come about, why we've changed our dashboards. Not showing enough information is just as bad as not showing too much. And I'm going to bring these two up quite quickly. The reports are not visible at the critical times, or there's too many reports being issued. So to combat that, in SLC, what we did was we have subscriptions inside Power BI. So we only run those Power BI prescriptions for those reports you've seen when it matters. So we don't want our credit report to come out when it's middle of July, and we don't care about it in the middle of July. We care about it at the beginning of the term when the students are walking in the door. Likewise, we don't want the results outstanding report, for example, to be delivered at the same time. We want that at the end of our terms or end of our semesters, whichever terminology you use inside your establishment. That's really key, and we only have a window where those are only delivered for a period of time, and it's emailed to them. It's not, you have to go look, right, there's an email to you, right, can you go look at this report now? No. We get a screenshot of that report, emailed to them every week on a Monday at 12:30 for 6 weeks, and then it stops. And we're quite rigid about that. If they then want to look at that report beyond that, that's fine. It might be that they've got some November courses or whatever. So say I'm doing the first 6 to 8 weeks from 28th of August, that gets you usually to about September, October. If they've then got a course in November, they can go look at it, but at least the bulk of the work and the bulk of the reporting is done in that period of time, and it stops. You're not getting bombarded by emails with us. I feel like I'm selling it a bit, but that's kind of the idea. It's like, I have to say this to the staff, you're only going to get it in a period of time. So, lastly, it's obviously our future, and I can't go through a presentation, and I don't think you can go through any presentations without having some sort of information about AI. We're obviously naturally looking at AI-generated picture, why not? We're obviously looking to streamline our reports as much as those have looked like they've been honed in on. There's still a plethora of reports that we could use and make it really accurate. AI forecasting and early warning systems all come in the same. We're looking at our machine learning and things like that can be done in the Power BI functions. But also, we were talking earlier today about things like our Jisc DET, digital elevation tool, and the data comes out of that, fantastic. It's there. We've got what a foundation, what our transform and elevate tools are, but sometimes there's a bit too much information. So throwing it at an AI tool is what we've been doing in Scotland. We've just said, right, throw it at a tool and then ask it, using the language model, what do you think our priorities should be? And seeing what comes out. And that's something that, some people might have done it around here. I know a couple of colleges in Scotland, when I speak to them, they've started to do this and make AI work for you a bit better with the data. Be ideal to do that. And naturally, I mentioned about the potential withdrawals. The potential withdrawals are, a rule at the moment inside. They're a rule inside the Power BI function, but it would be really cool if we could have sort of it looking beyond our attendance timetable, resulting, and actually look a bit closer at what's actually going on with the student. And that's when we can maybe have some prompts, and that's that bit going back to the one that's the presentation this morning about the nudge system and having that go. So we're almost on the door of that. We're getting there. And like I say, SLC's been through a massive journey. We're nowhere near the end of it, but it's been a massive, massive change for them, putting us quite forward thinking in terms of our data and the way we analyze. That's me. I think I've rattled through quite quickly, and I know it's quite it's hard sort of not to teach. It's hard not to do this as a technical a technical discussion. I hope you can see that we changed our workflows and changed the way we are. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you for everyone. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's really, really great. We have got some questions coming through the app, but again, just a reminder, either use the app or please do stick your hand up. I'll take a question, first of all, from the app, and it's a practical question, which you'd expect from this kind of audience, more resource base. So how many analysts do you have producing the Power BI reports?
One.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a small team, and again, it comes with the territory of being a small college. We have a small IT team of no more than 4 or 5 people and 3 developers. One of those developers takes on the Power BI task, and I'm actually training up the other 2 just now so that we can do lots from that. Yeah, don't get me wrong. It was in our insight. There was a talk this morning about your chief data operator. Well, that's kind of me. It's just like being latched on to what I do in a small college like this. But what we found was that when we were working with Power BI data and things like that, the people that knew were the developers because they were already working with it. So actually, it made sense to transfer them into working with Power BIs and reports and stuff like that.
Great, thanks, Chris. Next question for the app. No questions face-to-face yet. Do you feel that you've now moved past the my numbers don't match your numbers stage in your college, or are these areas, or do these areas still persist?
The straight answer is yes. However, you will get some contest. It would be contested sometimes. What tends to happen is when they introduce new fields, and that's where it gets contested. So 2 years ago, we had the "Are you a service student?" question come from Scottish Government that said that they wanted to ask this in enrolment. And as we put it into it, I think it's in part of the SITS system where it came as part of the update, it became one of the fields on it. But they actually put it in 2 locations. You could do a user-defined field and this, and that's where it got a bit, okay, well, these are 2 different areas. So it's really key that as you get changes in data, you follow it through so that you are displaying what's key with it. I will mention that was the same for care experience. Care experience is still, again, if you're legacy SITS users, you'll know that care experience is about 4 different locations in the system. and we have to find the one that gets sent to Scottish Government, and that way we can track back. So every time we did this, we're very confident with it, because we know that it's got to be the one that's issued, the one that's published, rather than, I want this field, I want that field. So yeah, it's better. Yes, this thing is the answer to the question. Sorry, I got away.
Is there any questions in the room? Yeah, we do have a couple of questions here. We can get a mic.
Hi, thank you. It's just about your curriculum planning programme.
Yes.
So you said that's in-house. Can we all have a go at it? Can you share the licence?
I thought that might be the case.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, that's been a long development, so
Okay.
I would love to demonstrate it more, and I have a feeling that I'm going to get lots of emails about this, so it's one of those moments I just put the target on my back. So yeah, I'm open to it if people want to talk about it, or if there's something that actually we can come through Jisc and we can demonstrate what we did with it. We felt that was going to be the key bit leading into data, which is why we spent so much time on it. So I would say, actually, that was before I was even head of the department that we started work on the curriculum plan system. So it's probably about 3 to 4 years of work.
Wow.
But I'll be happy to show more of it. It's not for the day. It's one of those I'll go.
Okay, thank you.
I'll get through it. Yeah.
We can get the other question.
Yeah.
Back up.
Oh yeah, probably a bit self-centered, this question, but we're currently looking at tender on MIS systems. You implied during that presentation that it was an hourly refresh, which is potentially live directly onto Unity. Is that correct, or are you?
Yes. Yeah. So that's actually, we are, for wrong or for rightly, we're moving from SITS to Unity in Scotland and in SLC at the moment. And basically, yes, at the moment it connects directly to SITS, but the output would be that it would connect directly to Unity. So what we'll eventually have is actually a full connection to Unity in the same way. So the way we built it, and talk about that master data set, was we built it so that any system could sit behind it. We don't really care what the student record system was. So over the last 3 years, it was more about the aliases and the dimensions that we had inside that. So it didn't, as long as we knew where the credits were, as long as we knew what the student was, it didn't matter. And that's really helpful, especially takes pressure off us as IT guys that are trying to do these new changes and move systems about, made it so much easier just to keep the system and the reporting the same, but the system can change behind it. So yes, the answer to the question is yes, it will be direct from Unity in about 3 months' time.
And your learner figure, was that youngsters or was that total population?
Total population. So there's a mixture in there, and if I broke down, there was a bit there where I could go into age, and I can then break it down by age. So yes, I can find out what the date of birth was and then work out the age for it.
Okay, I won't bore anyone else here. I've got a couple more questions. I might tap you up afterwards.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll be hounded at the networks, but yes, come and see me and I'll have a chat about it for you. So.
Thank you. And can I just say I'm really pleased that Chris was able to answer that, because I thought you said we've got Tinder as an MIS.
Yes. I deliberately ignored that, just thinking, it was like, I'm sure he didn't say Tinder. So.
I wanted to know more about that. One of the questions here, and this is really about data capabilities, I suppose.
Sure.
Are your senior leaders using Power BI in senior meetings without a data leader in the room?
Ooh. Cool, that made a reaction, didn't it? Essentially, yes. I would say the answer is yes. However, I usually sit in that senior leadership team, and when they're talking about data, and if there's any position where they are not sure about the data, they come to me. So I'm unofficially the data chief data operator, if you want to call me that. It's just become part of my role as part of what I did in terms of the information systems. And again, go back to being a small college, there are a number of roles which are kind of merged to it. However, what I have been really careful with saying to senior leadership team about using the data is, if you're unsure, don't quote it. Come back to us, find out from the student records team or myself about whether you feel that that's valid. And to be honest, I've not had them come back. It's been pretty, I would say, scientists would say the sun's not going to rise, 99% chance the sun's not going to rise tomorrow. I'll say it's 99% sure that the data is correct. But if there's ever that worry, they come back and speak to me. So there are meetings where I'm not in it. That's to do with learning and teaching and some of the quality stuff where they're using the Power BI reports. And if they ever feel like that data's not displaying what they need to display, they'll raise a ticket or they'll raise an issue with me, and that gets resolved. So that's how we deal with it.
Thanks, Chris. So a wider question from the sector perspective. How do you see data maturity across the college sector developing? How might that affect your future institutional approach?
Well, again, we're agile, and I think that's the thing we're all trying to achieve is an agile college with things like data and that sort of stuff. My description there about making the Power BI reporting and the actual master data set connect to any system in the background is really key in terms of our development. So if, for instance, they decide that they want, let's talk about things like shared student record systems and shared systems across the piece in Scotland, it doesn't bother us. It's not an issue, but there is still lots of colleges out there and universities that are concerned about having to change systems, and I think that's where the whole burden aspect comes in. You're saying that we should do something with our data. The burden is I've got to change my system and it's going to take a long time to do it, so there's a burden. I get away from that as much as possible, and I try my best to kind of have that conversation about it. It's always possible, but I need to know what, and that's the kind of word I have. So I'm not worried about it. Okay. I think I answered that question.
I think I'm sure you did.
Yeah, thank you.
Just check if there are any more questions face to face. No? Okay. Question here, you're a relatively small establishment, so this might not be a huge problem, but how do you deal with data ownership in the systems from where you absorb data from to form your data layer? Whose responsibility is it that changes made with Power BI reports downstream thought about and not to affect the integrity of the records?
So that is kind of see that one.
Yeah, Chris, can
you? So on data ownership, we created the reports, but the reports are the departments. So we put that out as, so if our applications team are looking at the application stats, it's their report. And what they do is and what we've been really clear about is making sure they report into us via a ticket or a request or whatever it may be. There's a level where we have to provide something to them initially to then decide whether we have to modify that or, in the first implementation. But we're at a stage now where they're quite comfortable with the data. They just ask for minor tweaks here and there. I can't see all the care experience students that are coming through the application. Okay, we'll add a filter back to that. So that's how we deal with it, and it comes from those departments. Again, maybe I should have put that on the challenges. That was a challenge. There's no two ways about it, and in bigger institutions, it's going to be even harder challenge. But it's having that senior leadership. Yes, we're going to do this. Yes, we trust your process and approach. And actually, if I ever got kind of contested about it, it was, no, we're doing this. This is the way it's going to have to be, and you have to do this. It's your report, your system, and it comes back that way. I think that answers the first part of the question, was it?
Yeah, I mean, it really was around data ownership, I suppose.
Yeah, I think I've answered that. Yeah, if you feel like if you ever ask that question and want to catch up with me at the breaks, that's absolutely fine. So.
Okay, well, just the final question. Did you use elements of co-design from stakeholders to ensure that each build met the user need?
Code design?
Co-design, yes, so working with the people who are the end users.
Yes, so actually, the best way we did it was we asked everyone for their reports that they're currently having to spit out for various reasons. We literally went to, and we actually do a Power BI report for HR as well, because they report to the HR committee, and I can't always show that, that's confidential data. But they were basically taking a spreadsheet, making it into a pivot table, and then putting it on a PowerPoint or a Word document to then send to the board. What we said was, instead of going through that way, give us the report that you are using, and we'll make it. And then that way we had the end result from it. So that's credit rejection report you've seen with the kind of graphs and the rest of it. That was what we were wanting to send to the board. Obviously not with all the data, just the graph bits. This is where we're at the moment. We have a quarterly board report. So they're only seeing just an overview of where the college lies. So we worked backwards from our reportment, and it's kind of what I was saying in the presentation, is working back from compliance, working back from necessity. We work backwards from literally a piece of paper that someone's drawn a graph on, and that's how we did it.
Thank you very much, Chris. Can we all thank Chris in the traditional way?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. We've now reached the lunch break, so please enjoy your food and look out for the lightning talks that are taking place in the expo area. We'll see you all back here at 1:45.